Welcome to American Baker in Germany, where the ingredients are German and the baker is American. I'm Michelle, and today we are continuing our Baking Basics series, and we're talking about how to make a homemade sourdough starter. It's really quite simple, just take some patience. Let's get started.
There are only 2 ingredients to a sourdough starter. We need 1 cup or 125 grams of flour for each step, and half a cup or 125 grams of water. That's half the volume but the same weight. This whole process takes a total of 7 days. On day 1, you will need a relatively large container with a lid. I'm using a yogurt bucket that we're recycling for this project. A large mason jar will also work well, whatever you have on hand. Then add the flour and water to the container and mix them together. It should have the consistency of peanut butter. For the first step, whole wheat flour works better than white. For the other steps, it doesn't really matter. Now, what exactly are we even doing here? We are basically creating a colony of bacteria. How are we doing this without adding bacteria to it? Well, bacteria live on every possible surface. Our skin, the containers, the surface of our counters, etc. Normally there aren't enough bacteria to bother us, and our bodies can withstand it without really trying. What we are doing is encouraging the growth of bacteria. Why would we do this? Well, the bacteria growing and multiplying makes the side effect of bubbles in your dough, which is basically exactly what yeast does. Sourdough bread does not use yeast at all, so in the event that yeast is not available to you, or if you just don't want to use it, then you can make a sourdough starter and use it instead of using yeast. Considering it's only made of 2 ingredients, that's pretty magical. Cover your container with a lid and place it in a warm place for a full day. By the next day, your starter should begin to form bubbles. If it doesn't yet, just keep going, it will eventually. On day 2, the first thing you need to do is remove most of the starter. Why do we do this? Because if you don't, you will need to feed them more and more, and we don't want an infinite amount of starter. A couple of cups will be fine. Just make sure you leave at least half a cup or about 8 tablespoons of starter in the container. Add the flour and water. Now any wheat-based flour should work. Mix it together and cover with a lid for a day. Day 3, you basically treat just like day 2. However, the starter can look differently on different days. So far, the starter has always looked quite similar, but I wanted to show that it can also be very thin and even pourable. As long as it's starting to form bubbles, the finished consistency can be very different. Just take out all but a few tablespoons and feed it with more flour and water. So just continue to do this every day for 7 days. Remove most of the current starter, feed it with flour and water, cover, and let rest for a day. But don't forget a day or your bacteria colony could die. By day 7, your starter is actually ready to use. If you want to use it today, there should be enough bacteria to leaven your bread. However, whether you use it or not, it still needs to be fed. In total, I used about 2 pounds or nearly a whole kilo of flour to make this starter. So you will need quite a bit of flour. Be aware of that before you start so it doesn't take you by surprise. Also, how do you keep your starter now that it's made? If you choose to keep it at room temperature, you will still need to feed it every day. If that's too much for you, consider keeping it in the fridge. This will put the bacteria into a semi-dormant state, and it will only need to be fed once a week. However, it still needs to be fed if you don't want it to die, so don't neglect your sourdough starter or you will have to start over from day 1. I hope you learned something today. For more recipes and tutorials, visit our website at AmericanBakerInGermany.com. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Subscribe for more tutorials.